This is week 4. This week we're looking at computer vision. As always, please do not sit in the last back row. Please move one row ahead. Listen, guys, I'm only slightly blind and I do wear contacts, so I can see you. And I can see the fact that you're not where you're supposed to be sitting. Perfect. Okay, for a quick overview, this is going to be Unit 4 in the Megadoc. We're going to be doing, again, my lecture on computer vision. As always, you have one synthesis question due in your animals TA group due November 4th on Tuesday. And then all your synthesis questions and your project, technical or non-technical, your choice, are going to be due on Thursday, November 6th in the submission form. Again, not your TA channel's submission form on Thursday. The TAs aren't going to be able to grade anything you put in the form on Thursday just because it's a much messier solution than doing them in the nice little form we've organized. Okay, one announcement. We are changing rooms. Due to a new Allen School policy, we cannot have more than 5 room bookings in CSA2. So we have to say goodbye to this very, very nice room. And we'll be moving to SIG 225. That is a little bit tentative. We have another room booked in SIG that is much nicer. We just have to figure out if we're still allowed to, hold our meetings there. So currently, meetings will 100% be in SIG. It might be into 225 or it might be in 233. We'll put an announcement about it by Monday at the very latest. Okay. And looking at our TA rankings, can I get a drum roll, please? In top, we have Bear Team with a whopping 12 points. Yes, insane. As always, we will be tracking our points. I will be tracking points over here on a sticky note that I just realized that I have to do. Bear, turtle, cat, and
Special feature room says 225.
Oh, 225?
Yeah.
So I have 225 on there.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, Bear Team, I think they won the game last week and also asked a bunch of questions, so that pushed them up. Butterfly Team, we added in, Butterfly Team is there? No. There, yes. We added in your extra points from the game that we neglected to add last time, so don't worry, you're up there. Cat and Turtle tied for last place. Step it up. And as always, if you're on the top 2 weeks in a row, that is when you get your prize. Last week, Turtle was on top, so no prize. What's up? The game, yeah, the Kahoot, or last week I had a quiz section. Then we did add those points in. We did, don't worry, we factored in all of our points. I assumed Bear might have won, but I think you know what it was? Bear got 2nd and 3rd place, so which is why their points did unfortunately get higher. But yeah, so we have a new game this week, so don't worry, you have a chance to bring your team up. And as always, questions and answers to questions are highly appreciated. Okay, and you are a Zoom Cat team. Are you Cat team? Okay, so I'll put 1 for Cat. Okay, let's move on. Attendance. If it is not open, please do let me know. Again, this is week 4. I accidentally removed week 3, but you can in fact put week 4, and it will accurately, fill in week 4. We're doing computer vision. Let me know if it's closed. I did just open it, but maybe it didn't go through. Is the form open? Okay, perfect. And while you guys are doing that, let's look at last week's attendance. Last week, I was asking about peanut butter. I personally did not ever have peanut butter as a child. It wasn't really something that was given to me, but I've heard about this concept of smooth versus crunchy peanut butter, and that's a big conflict amongst people. So currently we have smooth as a winner. Crunchy's a close second. None is actually also a very close third. So some people are just not peanut butter fans, and some people are Nutella fans. I relate. Nutella is great. Nutella's very good. Alright. Why are you nodding? You can't have Nutella.
No, I'm saying the nut allergy is probably a part of the nun.
Oh, the nun, yeah. Oh yes, nut allergy. Honestly, I should have included that as an option. How many people here have nut allergies, actually? Raise your hand. I got 1, 2, 3, 4. 4? 5? No, they was not raising their hands. And then 6. Oh, no, sorry. 5. You're the 5th. Yeah. If you want the attendance form, I'll put that back up. Okay. The attendance form will always be open. You can just go to the link in the Student Resources channel if you didn't have time to fill it out now. Or DM me and Arya if you weren't able to fill it out during this meeting. Okay, computer vision. So let's get into an overview of computer vision. So we're going to cover first what is computer vision. We're going to cover image processing, introduction to CNNs, which are the backbones of computer vision, and then also looking at the applications of computer vision. So what is computer vision? Computer vision is a field of machine learning that allows computers to see. We put see in question marks, in quotation marks, because it's not exactly the same as the way humans see. Seeing for computers is their ability to recognize patterns and objects and process them. There's many applications for computer vision: object detection, image classification, segmentation, which you guys will learn about if you read the technical article, facial recognition, medical imaging. Like I'm sure all of you have heard about like cancer scanning machine learning models that there are. All of that is like computer vision, and so much more. So we're primarily focusing on deep learning in computer vision, so neural networks and how they're used in computer vision. But there's many aspects of this field that lie far outside deep learning and neural networks. We don't cover them, but they do exist. And computer vision as an idea and a concept actually existed far before deep learning. So if you are curious about that, there's a couple optional sections, I believe, in the reading. You can also reach out to us. We can point you to more resources. So how do we actually process images? So images can be considered as a matrix of pixels, right? You take a matrix of pixels, and that's how you process an image. So can we take a matrix, a two-dimensional thing, and put it in a neural network? The way we've learned neural networks to be structured too, we cannot, because again, the neural network, that first column you see there, is one-dimensional. It's one vector going all the way down. So first thing we have to do is we have to flatten images to put them into neural networks. Since the input layer is one vector, it's not a matrix, we have to take a 5x5 image and put it into something like a 25x1 vector. Okay, so let's discuss how that might work. Does anyone have any ideas how that might work? Okay, I'm just actually going to move on just because I think you can see it better in this visual. So let's say this is the full image we have. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to split it into vectors of pixels. And then we're going to take some of these vectors. For example, I just isolated the vectors here that make up the ear. And then you turn them on their side and make them one long vector. So these are the images that computers see. Now you might understand better why it's see with quotation marks, because this is not exactly the same way we see, right? We see this way. But this is the way computers see. So this is an ear. A computer will see this, hopefully, if we've trained it correctly, and be able to identify an ear out of this. There's also color values that we have to consider when it comes to image processing. So grayscale images are, easy for color. We can just get away with, one singular matrix of pixels, where each value inside a cell depicts how strong the color is. Is it very dark? Is it very light? Is it somewhere in the middle? So that's like, this is what grayscale looks like, right? So if you have that handprint turtle or thumbs up turtle over there, that's sort of what the values are going to look like. If you see the values out here, where it's very, very light, they're going to be closer to higher numbers, whereas where it's dark, those are going to be lower numbers. But with color, you have more things to show, right? You have to show the strength of each color. You have to show how pigmented it is, and also how light and dark it is. So we have to introduce something called depth. Depth is showing multiple matrices. Each of these matrices are going to be called a channel. So in order to take this colored image of that the colored version of that same image, we have to have now 3 matrices to represent the same thing. So typically, color images require 3 channels, which are the RGB channels you see below. So each one of these matrices are going to focus specifically on one color. So you might be asking, why can't we use normal neural networks for computer vision? Why did I have to introduce this new concept called a CNN? Well, first, DNNs, or neural networks, are going to see an image as a matrix of values, right? Which means that the number of values we have is the height of the image times the width of the image times the number of channels we have. That's the number of pixels we're going to have to put in. So the neural network is going to have to analyze every single one of these pixels individually. If you guys remember from, I think, 2 weeks ago with Arya's lecture, each single value neuron is looked at, right? And then analyzed by other neurons, so on and so forth, or nodes. So here it's going to have to look at every single pixel individually. So a normal 24 by 256 by 256 color image in color, RGB, is going to require over 150 million pixels. So it's going to require, 150 million nodes and weights in order to make a proper neural network to process it. That is obviously a lot of things. So we don't want to have to deal with all of that stuff, right? We don't have to deal with every single pixel being looked at individually. There's also other issues with looking at pixels individually. If each pixel is individual, there's not going to be spatial relationships or awareness that are reflected in the processing done by this network. So what exactly is spatial relationships? So spatial relations are the way pixels are located or colored relatively to other pixels close by. For example, if you're looking at an image, right, you're not looking at one pixel at a time and determining what it is. You're looking at a group of pixels or a group of this and a group of that in order to figure out what's happening. You're looking at the pixels around it in order to understand every single pixel. Neural networks, like the normal deep neural networks we learned about, aren't able to do that. So DNNs are going to struggle to make sense of groups of pixels. Another thing is, if we're looking at it as a matrix of values, the DNNs are going to be very, very vulnerable to shifting. If you shift an image a few pixels over, suddenly everything changes. All the features that you learned in one place are going to be in a different place. For example, if you always learned that the ear is in that top left corner, the second I move the image a little bit, you're going to be looking for a ear, you're not going to find an ear, and you're going to have no idea what's going on. So we need something in order to fix all these issues. Yeah, what's up?
So do we use like k-means clustering as like a means to like sort of group similar pixels together or like easier representation?
I will get into exactly. So there's a whole new structure of neural networks. So we're going to actually build a new type of network that's going to be able to handle all these conditions. So yeah, I'll get into that.
Also, what team are you in? Sure.
Okay, so what we need is a model that can reduce the number of weights when necessary, can look at spatial awareness and relationships, and can also use translational invariance. Translational invariance is the ability of a model to recognize features no matter where they are in an image. For example, if I'm looking for an ear, even if it's not in that top left corner, I should still be able to find it. Whereas a neural network will always look for it in the same place, at least the standard neural networks we know and learned. So this is an example of translational invariance. You have that first image right there. So a neural network is going to say like, oh, maybe I'm looking for the Seattle skyline versus another skyline, which means the space needle must always be in the left third of the image. Suddenly it's on the very side of the image, and it's going to be like, not Seattle anymore. So we want something that has all three of these things in order to fully be able to do image processing the way we would like it to. So we actually drew inspiration from the human visual cortex in order to create this. So this is a layered processing system that operates like the visual cortex. So you're going to things like edge detection, hierarchical perception, and a feature recognition. So you're going to first focus on those low-level features like edges, and then progress to high-level features like objects. And we're going to learn more about how the visual cortex works next week with our visual vision system lecture. So we created something called the convolutional neural networks, which have everything we're looking for. So they're a neural network created specially for image processing. So the key components are convolutional layers, pooling layers, and fully connected or dense layers, which we're going to learn about each different type. No one's expecting you to know them. Oh my God. No one's expecting you to know them right now. So it's going to use fewer parameters because it's going to share parameters amongst nodes. It's going to have high spatial awareness, and it's going to be able to do translational invariance. And it does this by using information locality. Information locality is the ability to take in information around specific nodes, taking information from those nodes around it, and not focusing on each value individually, which we saw was one of the main faults of the standard neural networks we learned. So the powerhouse of the CNN is something called a convolution. A convolution and a kernel is basically the application of a mathematical calculation to a section of an image to extract information about features in that image. In this context, remember that a feature is like an attribute of interest, like an ear that I was doing, for example, a number of legs, the presence of a certain color, etc. So a convolution is that mathematical calculation. And it's going to be done using kernels. Kernels works like a sort of filter. It amplifies the weights of some pixels and minimizes the effects of others to try and draw out a feature or pattern. So this is done by taking a matrix and multiplying it by the section of an image with the kernel, as seen in the image right here. So that most back thing right there, that's going to be the image, the pixels. And then our middle thing right there is going to be the kernel. It's a small matrix, and then the mathematical calculation is going to be done, matrix multiplication, and you're going to end up with that 8 over there that you see at the very top. So the result of each calculation is going to fill one of the cells in the output of a convolution, which is called a feature map. If you're still not sure about what's going on, don't worry, we're going to go through a step-by-step thing of how you use kernels. So this is one example of a kernel. This is very, very simplified. For example, this is a kernel that might be trying to extract the feature of an ear. If you give it the image of an ear, like the first image, and apply the kernel, you're going to get a final value of 22. So how it works is you have this, I should stay actually with the mic. You have this image of an ear, right? And you're going to convert it into the pixels that we see earlier, like the pixel values. And then you're going to apply that specific kernel. And then you're going to do that matrix multiplication. And then the value that this cell holds in your feature map, like this section of the image holds in your feature map, is going to be 22. So higher numbers indicate the presence of a feature that the kernel is looking for, whereas lower numbers show that the feature might not be there. So the kernel is going to move across the entire input matrix. So this is only one section of our image, right? So let's say we have multiple sections of our image. We have the head of the dog, the next ear, the face of it, etc. It's going to move across the entire input region, looking for an ear in every single part. And the output matrix is basically going to show in which section an ear did exist. Right over there? Yes, so kernels are basically trained. So I'm going to go through and show a little bit more about that process. But a model is going to learn the values that need to be in a kernel. So it's going to start, it's a very similar process to what we saw with DNNs, right? With deep learning networks. It's going to try something random, and then it's going to go all the way through, do a classification, guess something, and then say okay, where did I go wrong? How far did I go wrong? How do I change these values so that my gradient is better? That was butterfly. Yeah.
So do the higher numbers in the kernel indicate that that's a more important part of the computer, or why?
It depends. There's not as much of a one-to-one connection. Like I said, it's a very simplified diagram of a kernel. These things are learned, right? And we're not exactly sure how. One thing about neural networks that I think Eric explained is that neural networks are a black box. We're not 100% sure why they're making every single decision. So I can tell you why I made these numbers this way, but I wouldn't be able to tell you why a model learned them this way. Yeah, but you can think of it like that. It wouldn't be incorrect necessarily, but it's not also the perfect way to think about it, if that makes sense. And cat? Wait, okay, I'll also track these. One cat, one butterfly. Yeah.
Kernels and applied over to specific sections. How does that help what we talked about earlier, where it's the translation of
Well, so a kernel is going to be applied throughout the entire input matrix. So it's going to go look at every single section. So let's say we were looking at the Space Needle before, right? So what it's going to do is you're going to have one kernel looking specifically for the Space Needle. And you're going to go through every section of the image and say, is there a Space Needle here? Is there a Space Needle here? Is there a Space Needle here? And then basically get a feature map. And wherever in that feature map you have a high value, there's a high likelihood that the thing you're looking for was there. Yeah, that's one bear. What's up?
So basically, I understand how kernel works. If we shifted the image, what if we turned the image or flipped it?
So there's different things you can train kernels for. So we're going to just go through and do a couple examples of a kernel, because there's kernels that are standard kernels for specific things. So actually, I'm going to show you an example right now. If my computer will move. So this is an example of a kernel. Does anyone have any guess. Loki, I would take any guess right now because you have no idea what kernels do. I'm not expecting you to know the answer. Yeah, wild guess.
It checks whether there's a vertical edge in the image.
That is exactly 100% true. What a not wild guess. Also, Bear? Okay. Yes, this is right edge detection. So this is looking for vertical edges in the image, for right vertical edges specifically. So can you see all those right edges in there? So remember, we start off with edge detection, and then we move on to higher processing, like object detection. We take all our edges and say, like, is there an object in here? So we start with simple, and then we go big. Okay. So this was one example, right? If this is the next example, what might it be? Yeah, Kat. Bottom edge detection, exactly. So this is basically going to show the bottom edge. So horizontal edge detection, specifically bottom horizontal edge detection. And if I flip this, what would it be? Yeah? Top edge detection. I assume you're also Cat? Oh, turtle. Sorry. Apologies. Top edge detection. Okay, now what about this one? This is a photo of our lovely education lead from last year, Vibhav. So notice there's a kernel where everything but the middle is negative. Does anyone have an idea of what the output might look like? Well, actually, first I'll have you discuss with the people around you. Notice like the previous edge detection things, how they work, how all the columns and rows are different. But here, everything but the center is negative. It could be almost like we combined the vertical and horizontal edge detection. So discuss with the people around you. Discuss. We'll have our TAs come and make sure you're discussing. TAs, please make sure people are discussing. Yes, I do see your hands, but I want you to talk to each other. Okay, I hear conversation dying down. Okay. Please raise your hand if you have an answer. I saw Neha's first. The outline of his face, but not what's inside his face. That is a good guess. It is mostly true. Yeah, we're going to be looking specifically at full edge detection. So this is a full edge detection kernel. It's looking for edges everywhere. So because if, for example, this kernel was only applied to this section, and the top sections, but not in the middle, you would get that. But this kernel is going to be done on every single group of this big kernels, or this big pixels, right? So because of that, that inside is just going to take out the inside of whatever is in the section, but the sections are very small. So we're looking at edge detection here, full edge detection. But it's also, the inverse of the before one, because edges are now white. But yeah, does everyone kind of understand the point of a kernel? Okay. So now let's see how a full convolution might work. So we're going to actually go through and do the math. Oh no, so scary, guys. When did this become a math class? For those of you who don't know, machine learning is a lot of math. Linear algebra is very important. I hate to break your hearts if you guys didn't know there was going to be math in here, but there is. So let's do it together, okay? So this is our convolutional example. So we have our image here. We have our kernel, or our kernel is like the pink thing that's sort of outlaid on top. And then we're going to do the math. So what we do is we're going to take every single thing inside of the section we're looking at. We're going to multiply it by the values in the kernel. and then we're going to add them all up. So you see you're multiplying 1 times 0.1, you get 0.1, 2 times 0.1, you get 0.2, etc., etc. And then you're going to get a final answer of 1.5, and that's going to go out to our feature map that we see there, right? And so then we do the same thing, and then we're going to shift the kernel one step to the right, to the right, and then do the math. Yeah. Those are hyperparameters. We're going to actually go over that in a bit. But yeah, so the size of the kernel, the values inside are all going to be learned. And you are there. Okay, same thing. We're going to shift the kernel one to the right so that we cover all of our sections. You'll notice there's a little bit of overlap here, but we're shifting just 1 pixel over. So then we're going to do our math, 2.1. We're going to shift down now because we can't go right anymore. Do our math, 2.1. And then we're going to shift right one pixel again. And again, remember, see, we've only shifted down 1 pixel. From here to there, 1 pixel down. And then 1 pixel right again, 2.7, 1 pixel, and then so again, we went from here, we went back and 1 pixel down. What is it, 3.3, and then again, we do our math, 3.3. So for example, if this kernel was looking for, I don't know, what could this kernel possibly be looking for? I guess it's just doing, it's not doing much, it's just toning it down. Where is it the most toned down? It would actually be the highest number, right? So the highest number is the feature we're looking for, so it would be that 3.3 right there. I think I picked a bad kernel, for example, so honestly that is not on you. You are also bare. Okay, so now we're going to do an activity where everyone's going to take a little bit of time and make their own kernel. So this is the link, but if you want, the slides are posted in the resource thing, so you can go through and find this link. I wouldn't make you type all of this by yourself, just because that would be a little bit sad. I could have done a QR code, but I wanted you guys to do this on your laptop. I don't know how to. There's no way you can make it. Oh, I could do a tiny URL. Didn't think of that. Okay. Next time I will do a tiny URL. But if anyone knows, the resources channel has a link to the folder that has all the slides. The slide is there. Oh, my laptop's dying. Like the. Oh yes, do save a copy. Yes, please save a copy. Don't change everyone's copy. Okay, for the sake of time, I'm going to encourage you all to play around with those in your own time. Definitely do it as part of your homework. And if you submit them in the group photos channel, maybe making them together might be not a bad thing to do in terms of TA rankings. But yeah, definitely play with this by yourself. I know a lot of people, like me specifically, I learn best by doing and by seeing how, like, when I change things, different things happen. So learn and understand more about it by doing. I think it'd be a really good way to learn. Okay, so now we're going to take all these convolutions together and we're going to make what's called a convolutional layer. So all this math we learned is what happens in every convolutional layer of a neural network. Each layer is going to take a predetermined kernel and apply it to the entire input matrix to get a new output matrix, which is then sent to the next layer. And actually, it's going to apply more than one kernel. We saw just one kernel. Usually, convolutional layers will apply multiple. And because a kernel is applied to the entire input, we can find a feature anywhere it exists in the matrix. And because the kernel is reused for every single convolution, every single calculation, and is a small matrix, we're limiting the number of parameters we need. which if you remember was one of the downsides of using a normal neural network. So yeah, again, we're going to be using something called a filter, which is a group of kernels that's going to output to one channel. So it's going to scan through that input matrix and produce that feature map. And we still get that translational invariance where even if you move features around, you can still find them, and also use a limited number of parameters. Okay, so now, like we were talking about earlier, there's a bunch of hyperparameters we can do. So the hyperparameters are basically features of a kernel that you can set and control. The weights of the kernel are still learned through that forward-backward propagation, but you can change different things about them. You can change the size of kernels. You can change the stride, which is the kernel step. Remember in the earlier example, every single time we moved the kernel, we moved only 1 pixel. But you can move more than that. For example, in this one right here, you can see that they're moving 2 pixels for every step. So the stride of 2 versus the stride of 1. And then you can also change the padding, which is the additional space surrounding a kernel. For example, right here, if we apply a padding of 1, suddenly our feature map is going to go bigger. And if you do a stride of 1 and a padding of 2, it gets even bigger. And the padding also puts space around the image, not around the kernel, around the image. And then you can also change the size of the input itself. So again, if your input size changes, the output feature map is also going to change. So basically what all of these hyperparameters do is they're going to change the section of the image you're looking at, and they're also going to change the size of your feature map, the outputted feature map. Yeah?
It looks like the third image has a stride of 2. Is that like right?
I honestly can't tell, it's moving too fast.
The stride of 1 is run out the side.
2. Yeah, that is a stride of 2. That is incorrect. The thing that I wrote down is incorrect. It is a stride of 2. Because otherwise the feature map would be significantly bigger. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Does everyone have any questions about that? We're going to look through stride and padding a little bit more. But I know these are more complicated subjects. So yeah, stride. So this is an example of a kernel with stride 1. Since it has stride 1, you can see in the second step that the kernel shifts over only 1 row per iteration. Or sorry, 1 column per iteration. So what do you think would happen with a stride of 2, for example? How is it going to affect the way the kernel moves? How is it going to affect the feature map? Does anyone have an idea of how specifically it's going to change the dimensions of a feature map? If I have a stride of 2 instead of a stride of 1? Yeah?
It will have the size of the feature map in each direction.
Exactly. The feature map is going to get smaller, specifically by a factor of 2. Because now we're doing we're doing half as many steps in either direction, both to the right and down. Cat, right? No. Yes. Does everyone understand that? Okay. Yeah, it's going to get a lot smaller. Does everyone see how now you're only going to be able to have 3 steps in each row versus here we had 1, 2, I can count this, I think it's 7 versus 3. Does everyone see that? The number of steps you can do is changing because now we move further with each step. If you want an analogy, you can think about like, hey, if I'm walking from one class to another, right? How many steps can I do? Well, if I take a step with a longer stride, I'll do less steps. If I do steps with a smaller stride, more steps, for example. So yeah, fewer iterations are going to occur. And since the size of the feature map is directly proportional to how many iterations we're doing, how many times the kernel is being applied, the dimensions of the feature map will be smaller. And by the way, I pulled all these images from the technical article. So for those of you that are doing the technical project and article for this week, you will be seeing these again. Okay, so now that we've done all that work with our convolution and we have our feature map, what do we do now? One thing is feature maps can be really big. I don't know if you saw the ones like this one's pretty big. The fourth one is quite big, right? So they're still big, and using them is going to still have a high computational cost. which we wanted to avoid, right? We want to avoid having a high computational cost. And they're still mapping features to specific areas, right? They're still saying like, oh, the ear is in this one specific section that we're looking at, which we didn't want, right? We wanted features to map to a general region, not to a specific location. So that means it's still vulnerable to shifting. And we can overfit to features. For example, it's always looking for that ear in that one place, even if the ear might be somewhere else. Like let's say if I move my cat like 5 centimeters, the ear's in a different place. So this is precisely what we didn't want, right? So we wanted to, really make sure that we're not vulnerable to shifting and we don't overfit and we don't have a high computational cost. So we have a new layer, a pooling layer, that we put after convolutional layers in order to increase the benefits we're getting. So a pooling layer pools the information we get into smaller components. So it's basically reducing the dimensionality of a feature map. I'm going to show you how exactly in the next few slides. No worries if you don't get it right now. So since the dimensionality is reduced, we have a lower computational cost. And it's also going to limit the specificity of region. So instead of saying the ear is always in this specific top left corner, it's going to say it's in that region rather than a specific location. This is also done using kernels, different types of kernels. So there's different types of pooling layers that each use different kernels. And we're going to see how that works. So the goal is basically to make to generalize features more, lower the computational cost, and also make feature detection less vulnerable to noise, positioning, and shifting. So one example is something called max pooling. For max pooling, you apply the kernel over every single region, and you just take the maximum value in each region. So for example, if the ear was over there where my 6 is in the top region, instead of always looking for the ear in that specific part of the feature map, we can just look for it in the top left corner, because that top left corner now has a 6. So now instead of saying like, oh, there's an ear in this specific place, there's an ear in the top left corner. Somewhere in that like top left not even top left corner, top left region. Somewhere in that top left region of the image, there's an ear. Same thing for the other side. So that's max pooling. So does everyone see how you're just basically pooling the information? You're saying that max value, you're preserving the maxed item and preserving that there's a feature somewhere in that region. You don't know where it is. It doesn't matter to you where it is. It's just somewhere there. You also have average pooling. So differently than max pooling, which you see on the left there, average pooling takes the average of all the features. So it's saying like, oh, there's more likely to be in here. Yeah, what's up?
Would it be less computation cost expensive to pool compared to just having a bigger stride?
To have a bigger stride means you can also lose features. For example, if I look at I'm going to go all the way back to the dog, guys. It's going to take a bit. Okay, if I have this dog, right, and I'm looking for that ear, if I have a stride of, let's say, 10, first I'll look at that top right, and I might not get the full ear. And then I'm going to skip all the way past it and just skip that ear completely. Or maybe I'll get one half of the ear and the other half of the ear, but not the full ear, which means I won't be able to get that full feature. So a higher stride means that you have, if it's too high a stride, you might just skip over features entirely. So it would, definitely it's a way to reduce computation, but there's also a lot of downsides to it, whereas pooling is specifically made just to lower computation without losing the information that you have. You might want to close your eyes just because I know this can be like, oh, bad. Yes?
So how exactly are we supposed to interpret the pooling layer values? Or is it more of like a black box still?
So like the values is in like the kernels that are used. The kernels are actually fixed. These are fixed kernels. These are not learned. So for example, max pooling is always going to take the max value. The kernel is what's getting the max value out. And the kernel here is what's doing the average. So there's a specific, say one more.
But then how do we interpret like the actual like end result?
The feature map. So this is basically saying, like, you should look at these relatively. If I'm looking, guys, I'm going to use the same example for the entire presentation. If I'm looking for an ear, there's very likely to be an ear here because it's a very high value. Versus here, might not be an ear anywhere. Imagine these are both, the same pooling technique, but just different results of it. I'll be like, hey, look, there's like 2 ears here. Fantastic. I might have an animal with ears. there might be an ear here, but there's definitely no ear here, and there's not really ears here. Might not, maybe one-eared animal? I don't know, right? So that's how you can interpret it. But again, yes, very important thing, for pooling layers, the kernels are set, they're fixed. You can pick max pooling layers, average pooling layers. There's a couple other ones, but these two are the most common. And then you have a couple other layers. So you have what's called a dense or fully connected layer. This is always at the end of your convolutional network. And basically every neuron at the layer right before is going to be connected to all the outputs. So usually your outputs, if you're doing binary classification, cat or dog, your outputs are going to be cat, dog. So it's either 1 or 0. Or for example, if you have classes, it might be 0 to 10 if you have 10 different classes. So it's going to be performing high-level reasoning after that feature extraction in order to combine the features to make your final prediction. Usually classification, I'm not exactly sure what regression model you'll be doing with this. Computer vision is usually, this or that. It's not like an in-between sort of thing, but yeah. You also have something called activation layers. You learned about activation functions last week. They're sort of there to introduce nonlinearity. Optionally, if you want, you can also introduce nonlinearity in your neural networks, or your convolutional neural networks as well. And you also have dropout layers. I'm not sure if you covered dropout last week, but dropout is when you actually randomly drop some values. You just randomly set some neurons to 0 in order to avoid overfitting to certain things. It's done through a process called regularization. Very important. A lot of you guys learned about that in your technical article. So this is what our final convolutional network is going to look like. We have our feature extraction steps with our convolution layers and pooling, and then our final classification with our fully connected layer. So normally what a convolutional neural network looks like is there going to be multiple of these feature extracting stages. You're going to have convolutional pooling for a very, very long time, and then at the very end, your classification. So let's just recap some key terms. So first we have a kernel. A kernel, again, is that matrix that extracts the key features from an input. You have the size, which is the dimensions of a kernel. These can be either set or learned. You have the number of input channels, which is basically going to define the depth of the input. So for color images, you usually have 3 RGB. For grayscale images, you'll have just 1. And then you also have the number of output channels, which is the depth of the output. We didn't cover this, but it's basically also showing like depth of classification. For example, if you have 2 different classifications, your depth will be 2. And then the number of output channels is also the number of filters that are applied. I don't know why they're both the same. I stole these slides. Okay, and then we have a filter. A filter is a group of kernels that's going to be outputted to a single channel. So for example, if we have our RGB right there, we're going to apply a different kernel, or maybe the same kernel 3 times to each of those channels, and then compile all of that to get one matrix at the end. Does that make sense? So that group of kernels right there is called one filter. And it's 3 kernels. This is another example. You might have 2 filters and 6 kernels, and then you do all of that, and then you get your 2 things at the end. Yeah.
So by filter, does that mean like if you're looking for a different like feature, like an ear or a mouth, and then you have 2 matrices, one for the ear, one for the mouth?
That's one way of looking at it. I'm also really, really simplifying how these things work by using the ear as an example. But conceptually, you can think of it that way. But there's a lot more complexities in exactly what each filter is doing and what each kernel is doing in that filter. Conceptually, a fine understanding. Yeah.
What is having more kernels add?
More kernels is going to add more feature extraction, more robust recognition. Some kernels look for the same feature twice, or the same feature multiple times. You can also do that edge detection that we were talking about. More edges and stronger edges means you'll really be able to detect objects. So each kernel serves a different purpose. Sometimes you can, again, repeat kernels like I was saying, but they're each trying to define and find and extract a different thing from the image we're looking at. You guys are both cat. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? Yes.
Is there like a general order of kernels that like are usually applied? Like is it usually like edge detection first, like bigger features to smaller features, or like how does that work?
So the kernels themselves prioritize edge detection. So yeah, edge detection is usually first. As for understanding features and things like that, that can happen with kernels, but usually happens in that final connected output layer. That's what's really like saying like, okay, here are all my edges, here are all my objects. Now let me understand what they are, extract the actual features from them. So kernels are extracting like smaller features, smaller scale things like edge detection. And then the final thing is saying like, okay, let me take all of this information that these kernels have extracted and get the big picture of what's happening. Yeah, fair. Yeah.
So if you have a filter, do you add the values from the kernels to get one value?
Yes. They might be weighted. I will get back to you on that. Yes. A lot of the times people will just, I don't know the exact reasoning of when people pick certain things, but I do know a lot of the times it's like you try one thing, you see the model accuracy, you try another thing, you see the model accuracy. Those are decisions that people make. Like with hyperparameter tuning, right? You're going to try a bunch of different things and find the right combination of things that makes your model perform. Average pooling and max pooling, the type of pooling you use is also considered like something you can tune. But I know there is specific reasoning about when to pick one over another, or like why you might think one might perform better, but I don't know it off the top of my head. Yeah.
So how is turning the picture? How kernel design turning the picture again?
So again, you can have like that edge detection, right? So edge detection will be able to find the edges and where they're oriented in every single thing, and then that final connected layer will be able to determine where those features are using the edges. I will get there is something specific. I think it's a way you use kernels in order to prevent turning from changing it. Put a question in the general chat and I will get back. There is a resource that I know, but again, not off the top of my head. But there's an article that I can send you that I believe will answer that question more fully. But yeah, if there's a question I wasn't able to answer right now, please do put it in the general chat so I can come back and look at it later. I have the memory of a goldfish, so I will forget. Yes.
So in all, or not all, but most of the examples that like the kernel values were like integers. Is it normally like that, or do you just use that for like the same thing?
Normally there are decimals and integers, but you see integers less frequently than you see decimal values.
Okay, because like I was wondering like what the scale is going to be like. Like, are you like what is considered a big number or a small number?
Again, a lot of it's relative. So it's relative to like, oh, sorry, I don't mean to change that. For example, if you're looking for an ear, right, and you like the model will learn that like a value of like, for example, I'm throwing a number off the top of my head, 10 really correlates to the presence of an ear, whereas 1 doesn't. So like it defines it, it learns the range as it does stuff using those kernels. Activation layers will be able to do that for you. They apply an activation function such as sigmoid in order to normalize things or add activation. Yeah. So there are definitely ways you can normalize it. Okay. With that, I believe Arya has made a lovely Kahoot.
It's in your Discord.
Arya has sent me a